Forget everything you think you know about Wild West pistols, because the deadliest sidearms of the frontier weren't the shiny six-shooters Hollywood loves to show you. They were pocket assassins, palm squeezers, shotgun hybrids, and concealed monstrosities that blurred the line between weapon and trick device. These weren't the guns worn for show. These were the ones gamblers hid in their waistcoats, outlaws pulled from their boots, and desperate settlers clung to, when survival meant bending the rules of firepower. Some were elegant, some were brutal, and some were so reckless they were just as dangerous to the shooter as the target. We've dug deep into archives and forgotten collections to bring you the real story of the Wild West's strangest and deadliest pistols. If you love uncovering the side of frontier history Hollywood doesn't want you to see, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us keep these forgotten weapons alive. Get ready, because this is 20 deadliest pistols of the Wild West, not just six-shooters. Number 20. The Duck's Foot Pistol, the crowd killer. Imagine facing down not one attacker, but 4, all charging you at once in a cramped saloon or a shadowy back alley. Most pistols of the Wild West could only put one man down at a time, but the Duck's Foot pistol was built for chaos. Its design was as bizarre as it was terrifying. 4 short barrels, all splayed outward like the webbed toes of a duck, capable of firing simultaneously with a single pull of the trigger. At close range, this wasn't a precision weapon. It was a human scattergun. One blast could wound or kill multiple opponents in an instant, shredding the advantage of numbers and turning a mob into a panicked retreat. In an era where brawls and ambushes could erupt without warning, the Duck's Foot offered its owner a brutal equalizer. These pistols were most often carried by ship captains, jail wardens, and lawmen who needed crowd control in tight spaces. On the frontier, a gambler or saloon owner might keep one tucked under a counter, ready to unleash mayhem if a poker game turned deadly. Its psychological weight was almost greater than its ballistic one. The sight of those 4 gaping muzzles pointing your way was often enough to make tempers cool instantly. But for all its shock value, the Duck's Foot had major flaws. Beyond a few feet, accuracy collapsed completely, and after a single devastating shot, the user was left with a slow and awkward reload. It was a pistol designed for one moment of pure terror. If that moment failed, you were in serious trouble. Still, as an opening act in our countdown, few pistols capture the strange, improvisational spirit of frontier weaponry better than the Duck's Foot. But if you thought this was bizarre, wait until you see the pistol that looked like a revolver, but carried the firepower of a handheld shotgun. Number 19. Pepperbox Pistols, the chaotic hand cannons. Before Samuel Colt's revolver took over the frontier, the Pepperbox pistol reigned supreme. At first glance, it looked like a revolver gone wrong. A bulky cluster of barrels pointing forward like the pipes of an organ. But in the 1830s and 40s, these strange handguns were some of the most feared weapons in America. The most famous examples came from Ethan Allen and later Allen and Thurber. Instead of a cylinder that rotated behind a single barrel, the Pepperbox carried multiple barrels, usually 4 to 6, all stacked together. Each pull of the trigger rotated the entire cluster and dropped the hammer on a fresh charge. The result? A storm of bullets that could be unleashed in rapid succession, making the Pepperbox the closest thing to a semi-automatic pistol the frontier had ever seen. At close range, the effect was devastating. A gambler or stagecoach passenger armed with a Pepperbox could fire again and again, without the tedious reloading that plagued single-shot pistols. The Allen and Thurber version even improved on the original with a side hammer design, giving it a slightly slimmer profile and more reliable ignition. For pioneers traveling through dangerous territory, that rapid fire could mean the difference between life and death. But the Pepperbox had a reputation as much for chaos as for reliability. Its heavy trigger pull made accuracy laughable, and beyond a few yards, it was anyone's guess where the bullets would land. Misfires and accidental discharges were common, and more than one unlucky owner managed to wound themselves while carrying one. Gunfighters often mocked the Pepperbox as a shooting lottery, where you might hit your target or the saloon ceiling. Still, in its day, the Pepperbox terrified opponents. The sight of 6 yawning muzzles pointed your way was enough to make many men back down. And while Colt's sleek revolvers would eventually push it into obscurity, the Pepperbox proved that sheer volume of fire could be just as intimidating as accuracy. The Pepperbox was chaos in the palm of your hand. But if this weapon thrived on raw volume, the next pistol on our list thrived on deception. A firearm disguised as nothing more than a gentleman's walking stick. Number 18, the cane gun. The gentleman's hidden equalizer. Imagine strolling down a dusty frontier street, tipping your hat like a gentleman, while secretly carrying a firearm no one could see. That was the sinister brilliance of the cane gun, a fully functional pistol disguised as an ordinary walking stick. On the surface, it looked harmless, even refined, but with a twist or a press of a hidden trigger, it transformed into a deadly weapon, capable of dropping an opponent before they even realized you were armed. Cane guns became particularly popular among gamblers, traveling salesmen, and wealthy townsfolk who wanted protection without advertising the fact they were carrying. In many saloons and frontier towns, openly displayed firearms were forbidden, or at least frowned upon, but no one thought twice about a man leaning on a cane. That plausible disguise made the weapon especially dangerous. In a tense encounter, the victim had no idea they were staring down a concealed pistol until it was too late. These weapons weren't just novelties either. Some were crafted by skilled European gunsmiths, chambered in calibers powerful enough to kill with a single shot. Others were mass-produced curiosities, less reliable but still deadly in the right circumstances. The element of surprise was their greatest asset. An outlaw expecting an unarmed merchant might suddenly find himself staring down the muzzle of what he thought was just a walking stick. But cane guns also carried serious drawbacks. They were slow to fire compared to conventional pistols, often single shot, and difficult to reload quickly. They were also mechanically delicate. A bit of dust or a rough jolt could easily jam the firing mechanism. In a drawn-out fight, they were worse than useless. Their true value lay in that one decisive moment where deception could save your life. In the Wild West, where appearances could be everything, the cane gun was a perfect example of style hiding lethal intent. And while disguising a weapon inside a cane was clever, the next pistol on our list took concealability to a whole new level. Compact, rapid firing, and small enough to vanish inside a gambler's waistcoat. Number 17, the Belgian Bulldog, the pocket powerhouse. Not every deadly pistol on the frontier was American-made. Some of the most feared sidearms came from across the Atlantic, smuggled into saloons and mining towns by traders who knew there was money to be made in arming the West. Chief among these imports was the Belgian Bulldog, a compact, double-action revolver that fit neatly into a gambler's waistcoat or a lawman's boot, yet carried the speed and firepower to decide a fight in seconds. Introduced in the 1870s, the Bulldog was small, rugged, and fast. Its double-action trigger meant there was no need to cock the hammer between shots, just point and squeeze, again and again. In a cramped saloon or an alleyway ambush, that rapid rate of fire could overwhelm an opponent before they even got their weapon clear of its holster. Chambered most often in .44 caliber, it packed a surprising punch for its size, earning a reputation as one of the most effective concealment guns of the era. The Bulldog became so popular that countless copies and knockoffs flooded the American market, with Belgian, French, and British manufacturers all eager to cash in. It was cheap, plentiful, and deadly enough that both respectable townsfolk and hardened criminals carried them. Lawmen appreciated the Bulldog as a reliable backup, while gamblers liked its ability to vanish into a vest pocket until the exact moment it was needed. Even Theodore Roosevelt is said to have carried a Bulldog early in his career, proof that the little pistol's reputation extended far beyond the frontier. Of course, it wasn't perfect. Its small frame meant limited accuracy beyond a few yards, and the heavy double-action trigger could throw off aim for an untrained shooter. Still, at the ranges where most Wild West gunfights actually happened, across a card table, down a hallway, or in the dusty street at 10 paces, the Bulldog was a lethal equalizer. It was the ultimate blend of speed and concealment, showing how European engineering reshaped the American frontier. But if the Bulldog proved that small could be deadly, the next pistol on our list took compact firepower to a strange extreme. 4 barrels of destruction packed into one tiny, pocket-sized frame. Number 16, the Sharps 4-barrel Derringer. The pocket-sized surprise. When it came to concealment, few pistols matched the Sharps Derringer. But this wasn't your ordinary single-shot pocket gun. Instead, the Sharps carried 4 barrels stacked in a compact block, each ready to deliver a .22 or .32 caliber round at the pull of a trigger. For gamblers, saloon girls, or anyone who wanted a last-ditch weapon without carrying a bulky revolver, the Sharps was the perfect blend of size and lethality. First introduced in the late 1850s, the Sharps quickly became a favorite across the frontier. Its clever rotating firing pin automatically shifted from barrel to barrel, letting the shooter fire 4 shots in succession without reloading. In an era where most Derringers gave you only 1 chance before you had to fumble for powder or cartridges, 4 quick shots was a serious advantage. A gambler who kept one tucked under the table could level the odds in an instant if a poker game turned bloody. The Sharps also earned a reputation among women of the West. Small enough to hide in a purse or a garter, it became a discreet yet deadly option for those who needed protection in a world that often left them vulnerable. For that reason, ornate, engraved versions of the pistol were frequently marketed as ladies' companions, pairing decoration with danger in a way that made them both fashionable and feared. Of course, with its small caliber, the Sharps wasn't built for long-range duels or battlefield encounters. A .22 short might not drop a charging outlaw in 1 shot, but at the close distances where it was actually used, across a card table or inside a dark alley, it could be fatal. Its real strength was in giving its owner more than 1 chance to survive. The Sharps proved that even the smallest guns could pack innovation and cunning design. But while this little Derringer was all about hiding power in plain sight, the next weapon on our list was built for intimidation. A brutal fusion of brass knuckles and pistol that turned fistfights into gunfights with 1 swing. Number 15. The Knuckle-Duster Pistol, the fistfight finisher. Some weapons were designed for precision, others for concealment, but the Knuckle-Duster Pistol combined both brutality and ingenuity into a single, compact package. Imagine brass knuckles fused to a small caliber pistol, giving its owner the ability to bludgeon an opponent in 1 instant, then pull the trigger in the next. In the unpredictable saloons and back alleys of the Wild West, it was the perfect weapon for a fight that could shift from fists to bullets without warning. Knuckle-Duster pistols emerged in the mid-19th century, with designs varying from simple single-shot barrels to compact revolvers grafted onto brass knuckle grips. They were especially popular among gamblers and city toughs, who valued weapons that could slip into a pocket and be drawn in an instant. For someone looking to keep an edge in a barroom brawl, the ability to strike with a crushing punch and then fire a shot was a deadly 1-2 combination. These hybrid weapons were never mass-issued to soldiers or lawmen, but they thrived in the underworld of frontier life. Outlaws, conmen, and hired enforcers carried them as tools of intimidation, as much as survival. The very sight of one sliding across a poker table sent a clear message. This wasn't going to be a fair fight. In a time where cheating at cards could earn you a death sentence, gamblers trusted these trick pistols to buy them a split second of surprise, often all they needed to survive. But the design had its flaws. The barrels were often small caliber, and the short grips made them difficult to aim with any real accuracy. Reloading was slow, and if you missed your 1 chance, you'd better rely on the brass knuckles to finish the fight. Still, as a combination of intimidation and improvisation, the Knuckle-Duster proved that frontier weapons didn't have to follow the rules. They could combine brute force with firepower. But the next pistol pushed that idea even further, fusing a massive Bowie knife with a heavy pistol to create one of the most fearsome hybrids ever carried on the frontier. Number 14. The Elgin Cutlass Pistol, the blade gun hybrid. At nearly 2 feet long and weighing as much as a small carbine, this monstrous single-shot pistol carried a Bowie-style blade fixed beneath its barrel. Half firearm, half sword. It was the kind of weapon that looked as dangerous as it truly was. First commissioned by the US Navy in the 1830s, the Elgin was designed for boarding parties, sailors storming ships where fights could turn into desperate struggles at arm's length. A sailor could fire a .54 caliber round at close range, then instantly switch to slashing with the massive steel blade. Brutal and overbuilt, the pistol blade hybrid was a weapon of pure shock value. Though originally military issue, some of these pistols filtered westward into private hands. Adventurers, explorers, and even a few gamblers prized the Elgin for the psychological edge it offered. The sight of a gleaming Bowie knife mounted under a pistol was enough to silence a room. Even if the single shot failed, the blade ensured its owner wasn't defenseless. But as a practical sidearm, the Elgin left much to be desired. It was heavy, awkward to carry, and painfully slow to reload. Once its one round was fired, it was essentially just a sword with a clumsy handle. For most gunfighters, the weapon was more spectacle than substance. Still, its sheer presence made it unforgettable. A statement piece that blurred the line between sidearm and melee weapon. The Elgin Cutlass pistol proved that intimidation could be just as powerful as practicality. But while this oversized blade pistol hybrid terrified its enemies with brute force, the next pistol on our list was far more subtle. A compact Derringer with a strange mechanical twist that gamblers kept hidden for the perfect moment. Number 13. The Remington Zig-Zag Derringer, the quirky gambler's gun.
At first glance, the Remington Zig-Zag Derringer looked like just another pocket pistol, the kind gamblers and ladies carried for close-range defense. But hidden inside its compact frame was one of the strangest firing systems of the entire Wild West. Instead of two barrels with two triggers, the Zig-Zag used a rotating firing pin that zigzagged back and forth between the barrels with each pull of the trigger. The result was a small, easily concealed pistol that fired alternately from two stacked barrels, offering twice the chances to survive in a life-or-death encounter. Introduced in the late 1860s, the Zig-Zag became popular in the same circles that carried other Derringers: gamblers, barkeeps, traveling merchants, and anyone who wanted a weapon that could disappear into a vest or a boot. At saloon tables, it was a favorite backup gun. A gambler could play his hand calmly, even as tensions rose, knowing he had two quick shots ready to settle a dispute if the cards went bad. The compact size and easy concealment made the Zig-Zag deadly in the kind of close-quarters fights that defined the frontier. A shot across a poker table or inside a crowded saloon didn't need long barrels or fancy sights. It needed speed and surprise. And while other Derringers required two separate hammers and triggers, the Zig-Zag's alternating firing system made it quicker and simpler under pressure. But that clever design came at a cost. The rotating firing pin was fragile, prone to wear, and if it jammed, the pistol became useless in an instant. Its accuracy was limited to just a few feet, and the small .22 or .32 calibers weren't known for stopping power. Still, in the hands of someone who knew when to use it, the Zig-Zag was more than enough to end a fight before it began. The Zig-Zag Derringer proved that even the smallest pistols could hold big surprises. But while this curious pocket gun was all about concealability and trick mechanics, the next weapon on our list swung hard in the opposite direction, a massive, oversized pistol that turned every close-range fight into a battlefield. Number 12. The Howdah Pistol, the frontier hand cannon. If the Derringer was the gambler's hidden ace, the Howdah Pistol was the hunter's last resort, a massive, double-barreled handgun originally built for a very different battlefield, the jungles of India. British officers carried these enormous pistols as a defense against tigers and other dangerous game that could leap onto an elephant's howdah seat, giving the weapon its exotic name. But by the mid-19th century, surplus howdahs began making their way into the American frontier, where settlers and lawmen quickly realized their devastating potential. Chambered in monstrous calibers like .577 or .65, the Howdah was essentially a sawed-off shotgun small enough to carry in a holster. Each pull of the trigger unleashed a blast powerful enough to drop a charging bear, a wild steer, or, in the wrong saloon, several men at once. At close range, it was less a pistol and more a handheld cannon, capable of ending a fight in a single, thunderous blast. The Howdah's appeal on the frontier was obvious. Outlaws respected it, lawmen trusted it, and anyone facing overwhelming odds found comfort in its sheer stopping power. In mining camps and remote settlements, where wild animals posed as much of a threat as armed bandits, the Howdah gave its owner an edge that few other pistols could match. Its twin barrels also offered insurance. If one shot misfired, the other could still save your life. But carrying such a beast came with problems. The Howdah was heavy, awkward to conceal, and had brutal recoil that could leave an untrained shooter bruised and shaken. Reloading was slow, and in a drawn-out gunfight, its owner might be at a serious disadvantage after those 2 thunderous shots. It was a pistol built for extremes. Either it saved you instantly, or it left you scrambling.
Still, the Howdah's presence on the frontier proved one thing. Size alone could be as intimidating as any reputation. And while this oversized hand cannon ruled through raw power, the next pistol on our list went the opposite route. Small, stylish, and carried by some of the most famous names in frontier history. Number 11, the Apache Revolver, the outlaw's Swiss Army knife. If one weapon summed up the ingenuity and desperation of 19th century street fighting, it was the Apache Revolver, a French import that combined 3 weapons into one terrifying package. On the surface, it was a compact pinfire revolver, but folded into its frame were 2 brutal surprises: a set of brass knuckles for close quarters brawling, and a folding dagger blade for when the shooting stopped. In one stroke, the Apache turned its owner into a walking arsenal. Designed in the 1860s and carried by underworld gangs in Paris, the Apache Revolver eventually found its way across the Atlantic, where it quickly appealed to gamblers, outlaws, and shady characters in frontier towns. Imagine being cornered in a back alley. First, you're staring down the revolver's muzzle. Then, you're crushed by its knuckle-duster grip, and if you still managed to stand, a blade was waiting to finish the fight. For an opponent, there was no predicting how the weapon would strike next. The revolver itself was rudimentary, a pepperbox-style cylinder firing weak 7mm pinfire cartridges without even a trigger guard. But its strength wasn't in ballistics. It was in versatility and intimidation. Flashing one across a poker table sent a clear message. This wasn't going to be a fair fight. The folding design made it easy to conceal, and its reputation spread fast among those who lived on the edge of the law. Of course, the Apache was far from perfect. Its tiny cartridges lacked stopping power, its crude mechanics were unreliable, and the blade was too short to match a proper knife. In many ways, it was more of a thug's tool than a professional gunfighter's weapon. But in the chaos of a barroom ambush, the combination of pistol, blade, and knuckles was enough to make it one of the most feared curiosities of the frontier. The Apache thrived on dirty tricks and brutal close-quarters fighting. But the next pistol on our list couldn't be more different. A bold American experiment that looked forward to a new age of firearms, with a built-in magazine decades ahead of its time. Number 10. The Remington Ryder Magazine Pistol, the first step toward automatics. Decades before semi-automatic pistols became the standard, Remington unveiled one of the most ambitious handguns of the frontier, the Ryder Magazine Pistol. At first glance, it looked like a curious single shot, but hidden beneath its barrel was a tubular magazine, capable of holding up to 7 rounds of .32 rimfire ammunition. For the Wild West, this was nothing short of revolutionary. Introduced in the 1860s, the Ryder gave its owner the ability to fire shot after shot without the laborious reloading that most single-shot pistols demanded. Cartridges fed from the magazine into the breech, a radical departure from the powder and ball systems that still dominated much of the era. For frontiersmen used to revolvers, the idea of a pistol with a built-in ammunition reservoir felt like a glimpse of the future. The Ryder was never produced in huge numbers, but it made its mark on those who carried it. Lawmen and gamblers alike valued the confidence of having multiple rounds on tap without fumbling for powder flasks or percussion caps. It wasn't the fastest pistol to operate, but compared to the slow reloads of Derringers and Pepperboxes, it was an enormous leap forward. Still, the Ryder had its flaws. Its unusual mechanism was delicate, prone to jams, and required constant maintenance to keep running smoothly. Ammunition was limited to weaker rimfire cartridges, and in a straight fight against heavier calibers, it was badly outgunned. For many shooters, it was less a primary weapon and more a fascinating backup, a piece of experimental engineering that might tip the odds in a desperate moment.
Even with its shortcomings, the Remington Ryder magazine pistol pointed the way forward. It hinted at a world where handguns weren't just single shots or six-shooters, but repeaters capable of sustained fire. On the frontier, it was an oddity. In hindsight, it was a milestone on the path to modern sidearms. The Ryder looked toward the future with its built-in magazine.
But the next pistol on our list took a very different gamble. An experiment so unusual, it ended up being just as deadly to the shooter as to the target. We've spent hours digging into old archives and forgotten collections to track down these frontier oddities, so you don't have to. If you're finding value in this kind of deep dive, a quick like and subscribe goes a long way in helping us keep these stories alive. Now, let's get back to the countdown, because the next pistol is one of the strangest death traps the frontier ever saw. Number 9. The Turret Revolver, the death trap. In a frontier full of innovation, some ideas were bold, and some were disasters waiting to happen. The turret revolver was both. Instead of using a traditional rotating cylinder, like every other revolver, this oddball weapon used a flat, circular turret of chambers that spun horizontally. From above, it looked more like a pepper grinder than a pistol, and in practice, it earned a reputation as one of the most dangerous handguns ever made. Patented in the 1850s by inventors like P.W. Porter, the turret revolver promised high capacity in a compact design. Its circular turret held multiple chambers, each loaded with powder and ball. With each pull of the hammer, the turret rotated to line up a fresh charge with the barrel. In theory, this gave the shooter an advantage over single shots. In reality, the design created a terrifying problem: chain fires. Because the chambers were all exposed in a flat ring, sparks or burning powder could ignite more than one at a time. When that happened, bullets didn't just leave the barrel, they blasted sideways, upward, or even backward, straight into the shooter's arm or face. More than one unlucky owner learned the hard way that the turret revolver was as much a threat to its user as to its enemies. Despite the risks, turret pistols saw limited use on the frontier. Collectors and curious adventurers were fascinated by their strange design, and some carried them simply for the shock value. Facing a weapon that looked nothing like a Colt or a Remington was unnerving, even if the shooter was just as nervous pulling the trigger. The turret revolver didn't last long, and for good reason. But its brief, disastrous existence is a reminder that not every invention of the Wild West was a success. Some were dead ends, literally. Number 8. The Ladies' Companion Derringers. Deadly fashion statements. Not every pistol on the frontier was carried by hardened outlaws or grim-faced lawmen. Some were crafted as much for appearance as for lethality. Elegant little Derringers that blended fashion with firepower. Known as Ladies' Companion Pistols, these ornate weapons were often nickel-plated, engraved, or fitted with pearl and ivory grips, turning them into stylish accessories that could also end a fight in an instant. Marketed directly to women in the mid to late 19th century, these Derringers were small enough to vanish into a purse, a muff, or even a garter. But don't let their size fool you. Chambered in calibers like .22 or .41 rimfire, they were more than capable of killing at the close distances where they were used. In saloons, dance halls, and gambling dens, they were a quiet equalizer for women who lived in a world that often left them vulnerable. Gamblers also embraced these decorative Derringers, carrying them as backup weapons hidden beneath waistcoats or tucked into boots. The duality of the design made them especially dangerous. They looked like jewelry, but functioned as tools of survival. More than one unlucky card cheat discovered too late that the lady across the table wasn't bluffing. The psychological edge was undeniable. In an era when many underestimated women's role in violence, a beautifully engraved Derringer could disarm suspicion right up until the moment it was drawn. That split second of surprise was usually all its owner needed. Of course, like all Derringers, they had limitations. 1 or 2 shots at most, short barrels, and limited accuracy meant they were not weapons for drawn-out gunfights. But for the intimate violence of saloons and backrooms, they were brutally effective. The Ladies' Companion Pistols proved that in the Wild West, weapons weren't just about survival.
they were about identity, status, and sometimes deception. And while these elegant Derringers charmed the gambling halls, the next pistol on our list was anything but refined. A rugged British import that became the weapon of choice for lawmen, officers, and outlaws alike. Number 7. The British Webley RIC, the Officer's Bulldog. Not every pistol that shaped the Wild West was born in America. Some came across the Atlantic, carried by military men, traders, and adventurers who knew the value of European engineering. Chief among these imports was the Webley RIC, short for Royal Irish Constabulary, a compact, rugged revolver that became a favorite of both officers and civilians on the frontier.
Introduced in the 1860s, the Webley RIC was chambered in .442 caliber, giving it formidable stopping power in a frame much smaller than the massive Colts and Remingtons of the day. Its double-action trigger allowed rapid fire without manual cocking, making it fast, simple, and devastating at close range. For a lawman facing multiple attackers or an outlaw needing quick shots in a cramped alleyway, that speed could mean the difference between walking away and being carried out. The RIC's design was ahead of its time. Its solid frame construction gave it durability, while its short barrel made it easy to conceal under a coat or vest. Officers returning from service in Europe often brought their Webleys west, and soon gamblers, sheriffs, and even outlaws began favoring them. Its reputation for reliability made it a trusted companion in saloons and mining camps, where tempers flared and fights broke out without warning. But the Webley's psychological presence was just as important as its mechanics. To see one drawn in the hands of a cool, experienced shooter was enough to freeze a room. The double-action crack of successive shots sounded like more than one gun, and opponents often panicked before realizing it was a single pistol in skilled hands. Of course, it wasn't perfect. The .442 cartridge, while powerful, was less common in America, and owners often struggled to find ammunition outside major towns. Its compact size also limited accuracy at long range. But in the real-world distances of frontier fights, across a card table, in a back alley, or on a darkened street, the Webley RIC was a game-changer. It proved that imports could hold their own against America's finest designs. And while this officer's revolver earned respect through rugged practicality, the next weapon on our list took practicality in a completely different direction. A repeating pistol so unusual it looked like a miniature rifle cut down to handgun size. Number 6. The Volcanic Pocket Pistol, the lever-action handgun.
Long before Winchester became a household name on the frontier, its roots lay in one of the strangest pistols ever designed, the Volcanic Pocket Pistol. At first glance, it looked like a revolver's distant cousin, but a closer look revealed something groundbreaking: a lever-action mechanism grafted onto a handgun. It wasn't just unusual. For the 1850s, it was science fiction brought to life. Instead of single-shot loads or rotating cylinders, the Volcanic used a tubular magazine beneath the barrel, feeding self-contained rocket ball ammunition into the chamber with each pull of the lever. This gave the pistol up to 10 rounds on tap, an unheard-of capacity in a world where most sidearms gave you only 1 or 2. In the right hands, it could fire a rapid succession of shots, overwhelming opponents who had never seen such technology before. The pocket pistol version was smaller than the full-size Volcanic, but it retained the same futuristic flair. Gamblers, adventurers, and even a few outlaws carried them, fascinated by the promise of repeating firepower in such a compact frame. To an opponent armed with a Pepperbox or a Derringer, facing down a Volcanic was like staring into the future of gunfighting. But for all its innovation, the Volcanic was plagued with problems. The rocket ball ammunition, with powder stored inside the bullet itself, was weak, unreliable, and often failed to deliver the stopping power needed in a fight. The complex mechanism could jam easily, and in the harsh dust of the frontier, maintenance was a constant battle. Many owners abandoned them in frustration, returning to simpler revolvers that worked every time. Still, the Volcanic pocket pistol left its mark. It was the direct ancestor of the Henry rifle, and later, the Winchester lever action, the very guns that came to define the American frontier. In many ways, this quirky pistol was the seed that grew into legends. The pocket pistol showed how far innovation could be pushed, even if the results were flawed.
But the next weapon on our list was no experiment. It was a proven killer. The iconic Derringer that became the ultimate backup gun of the Wild West. Number 5, the Remington Model 95 Double Derringer. The iconic hideout gun. If there was one pistol that defined concealed carry in the Wild West, it was the Remington Model 95 Double Derringer. Compact, simple, and deadly at close range. This over-under twin-barreled pistol became the go-to backup gun for gamblers, saloon girls, barkeeps, and even hardened outlaws. If the big revolver on your hip ran dry, this was the ace you pulled from your boot. Introduced in 1866, the Remington Double Derringer was chambered in .41 rimfire. A small cartridge by frontier standards, but more than enough to kill at the distances where this pistol was meant to be used. Its break-action design made it quick to reload, while the alternating striker fired one barrel at a time. 2 shots may not sound like much, but when the barrels were pressed against an enemy across a poker table, that was all it took. The Model 95 was cheap, reliable, and produced in massive numbers, which meant they spread everywhere. Lawmen carried them as backups, gamblers kept them tucked in their waistcoats, and prostitutes in rowdy saloons relied on them for self-defense. Its presence was so common that more than a few gunfighters were killed not by revolvers in a fair duel, but by a Derringer drawn from hiding after the shooting was supposed to be over. Psychologically, the Derringer was terrifying because of its invisibility. You could never be sure the man you just outgunned wasn't hiding one more shot up his sleeve. The mere suspicion of a hidden Derringer kept tensions high long after the shooting stopped. Of course, like all Derringers, it had flaws. Limited range, modest power, and only 2 shots before a reload. But its strengths were undeniable. Small enough to hide anywhere, simple enough for anyone to use, and lethal in the sudden violence of saloon life. The Remington Double Derringer became a legend in its own right. Number 4, the Lemat Grapeshot Pistol. The revolver with a shotgun's heart. What if 9 revolver shots weren't enough? For Dr. Jean-Alexandre Lemat, a New Orleans physician turned inventor, the answer was simple. Add a shotgun barrel. The result was the Lemat Grapeshot Pistol, one of the most fearsome hybrid weapons ever carried on the frontier. With a 9-shot cylinder wrapped around a central 20-gauge smoothbore, the Lemat could switch from revolver to shotgun with the flick of a lever. Confederate cavalry officers made the Lemat a battlefield legend during the Civil War. Imagine squaring off against an opponent, counting his shots, and assuming he was empty after 6, only to realize he had 3 more rounds left, plus a shotgun blast powerful enough to stop a charging horse or scatter multiple foes at once. That psychological shock alone gave the Lemat a fearsome reputation. After the war, a few of these pistols trickled westward, finding their way into the hands of civilians, lawmen, and outlaws who valued overwhelming firepower. In a saloon fight or ambush, the Lemat's sheer versatility was unmatched. A revolver for precision, a shotgun for devastation, all in one sidearm. But brilliance came with drawbacks. The Lemat's bulky frame made it awkward for daily carry, and its complex internals were prone to fouling in dusty frontier conditions. Maintenance was a nightmare, and finding ammunition for both calibers wasn't always easy in remote towns. For many, it was more curiosity than practical sidearm. Still, the aura around the Lemat never faded. Wild Bill Hickok was even rumored to have carried one, appreciating its ability to deal with multiple attackers in unpredictable gunfights. Whether in war or in the saloon, the Grapeshot pistol embodied the frontier's hunger for innovation, a weapon that refused to play by the rules. The Lemat thrived on pure overkill, but the next pistol on our list carved its place in history with just a single shot. One tiny Derringer, one pull of the trigger, and one of America's greatest tragedies unfolded. Number 3. The Philadelphia Derringer, the Assassin's Pistol. Some guns earn their place in history through battles won, others by the legends who carried them. But the Philadelphia Derringer carved its name into America's memory with a single shot: the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. On April 14, 1865, John Wilkes Booth slipped into Ford's Theater with one of these small, single-shot pistols tucked into his coat. When he pulled the trigger behind Lincoln's head, the Philadelphia Derringer instantly
became one of the most infamous weapons ever made. Designed by Henry Derringer in the 1820s, this pistol was tiny, elegant, and devastating at point-blank range. Chambered in .41 caliber percussion cap, it was powerful enough to kill a man instantly across a card table or in a crowded saloon. Its small size made it a favorite among gamblers, ladies, and anyone who wanted protection without advertising it. Hidden in a vest pocket or boot, it was the perfect last-ditch equalizer. On the frontier, the Philadelphia Derringer was everywhere. Saloons and gambling halls were full of them, and their presence changed the psychology of a fight. A man disarmed of his revolver might still have one hidden in his vest, ready to take revenge when his opponent least expected it. In a world where trust was rare, the shadow of a concealed Derringer hung over every confrontation. But like all Derringers, it had limitations. One shot was all you had, and reloading in the middle of a fight was nearly impossible. Accuracy dropped quickly beyond a few feet, and the small frame was never built for long-range duels. It was a weapon for sudden bursts of violence. Nothing more, nothing less. Still, its impact can't be overstated. From the smoky saloons of the frontier to the balcony of Ford's Theater, the Philadelphia Derringer proved that sometimes the smallest pistol could leave the biggest mark on history. But the next pistol on our list went in the complete opposite direction. A hulking, double-triggered monster that looked like it came from another planet. Number 2. The Savage Navy Revolver. The double-trigger beast.
Some pistols of the Wild West were elegant. Others were practical. The Savage Navy was neither. With its oversized frame, strange curves, and bizarre double-trigger system, it looked more like a prop from a science fiction movie than a frontier sidearm. But for a time in the 1860s, this ugly duckling of a revolver was one of the most innovative and intimidating handguns in America. Built in Middletown, Connecticut, and adopted in limited numbers during the Civil War, the Savage Navy carried 6 shots of .36 caliber firepower. What made it unique was its operating system. The front trigger rotated the cylinder and cocked the hammer, while the rear trigger fired the round. In theory, this allowed for faster, smoother shooting than traditional single actions. In practice, it gave the gun a surreal appearance. 2 triggers jutting from a bulky frame that looked almost alien compared to its Colt and Remington rivals. After the war, many surplus Savages made their way west. Outlaws, drifters, and a few curious lawmen carried them, valuing their intimidating look and rapid-fire capability. And intimidation was half the point. Facing down a revolver that looked nothing like anything you'd ever seen was enough to shake even seasoned gunfighters. But for all its creativity, the Savage Navy had flaws. Its heavy weight made it awkward to carry. The double trigger system took practice to master, and its intricate mechanics were prone to fouling in dust and grit. It was powerful, but it was also unforgiving. A gun that rewarded training and punished hesitation. Still, the Savage Navy deserves its place near the top. It was bold, innovative, and utterly unforgettable. A revolver that refused to play by the rules. And while it stood out for sheer strangeness, the final pistol in our countdown pushed that strangeness even further. A round, palm-sized oddity that didn't even use a trigger. Number 1. The Protector Palm Pistol. The frontier's strangest killer. Of all the pistols that stalked the Wild West, none captured the imagination quite like the Protector Palm Pistol. Round, compact, and designed to fire with a squeeze of the hand, it looked more like a pocket watch than a weapon, but beneath its odd design was a deadly purpose, to give its owner the ability to strike without warning, in a world where hesitation could mean death. Patented in 1882, the Palm Pistol was chambered in .32 rimfire and carried 7 rounds in a rotating cylinder. Instead of drawing, cocking, and aiming, you simply pointed your closed fist, pressed the button on the backplate with your palm, and fired. It was the ultimate surprise weapon, small enough to vanish into a coat pocket, deadly enough to drop a man at close range. For gamblers, barkeeps, and even women in dangerous towns, the Protector was more than a curiosity.
It was an equalizer. Imagine sitting at a card table, your opponent smugly confident that you were unarmed. And then, in a blink, your fist explodes with gunfire. The psychological shock alone made the pistol terrifying, even before the bullet found its mark. But like so many Frontier oddities, its strengths were also its flaws. The Protector's small caliber limited its stopping power, and the unusual firing system was delicate and prone to jamming. Anyone relying on it in a prolonged fight risked being left with nothing more than an odd-looking hunk of steel in their hand. Still, in the kind of sudden, intimate violence that defines saloon life, it was more than enough. The Protector palm pistol wasn't the most powerful, or the most reliable, or even the most practical gun of the Frontier, but it was unforgettable. Its strange design, surprising lethality, and sheer audacity made it a symbol of the Wild West's endless experimentation with firearms. And that's why it takes the top spot on our list. Not because it was the biggest or the strongest, but because it perfectly represents the Frontier spirit. Bold, unpredictable, and always a little dangerous. From four-barreled Derringers to shotgun revolvers, from assassin's pocket pistols to bizarre palm squeezers, the Wild West was armed with far stranger weapons than Hollywood ever dared to show. These weren't just six-shooters on a cowboy's hip. They were experiments, curiosities, and brutal tools of survival that shaped life on the frontier. Which of these pistols shocked you the most? The turret revolver that could blow up in your own hand? The Lemat with its hidden shotgun blast? Or the Philadelphia Derringer that changed American history with a single shot? Let us know in the comments. We love hearing which of these forgotten weapons surprised you the most. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the deadliest and strangest pistols of the Wild West, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. We've got even more untold frontier history coming your way, the kind of stories Hollywood never got right. Until next time, keep exploring.